Jensen Huang is worth over $200 billion, but eats in his company cafeteria, wears the same leather jacket for 20 years.
Same jacket. Look at that. I haven't aged.
And started his empire in a Denny's booth. Now we're going inside his massive California empire to see how this man really lives. Let's get into it. The man who owns the view. Picture the single most expensive block of residential real estate in one of the most expensive cities in America. A ribbon of pavement in San Francisco so rarefied, so drenched in old money and new money, and the kind of money that doesn't even have a name yet, that the locals stopped calling it a street a long time ago. They call it the Gold Coast. They call it Billionaires Row, and on that stretch of Broadway, wedged in among Gilded Age mansions and the ghosts of shipping fortunes, there sits a sleek, curved slab of pale limestone that looks like it was carved out of a single impossible block of stone. Behind those walls, floor-to-ceiling windows drink in the entire northern edge of the world. The Golden Gate Bridge, the shimmering bay, the Presidio, the marine headlands rolling green into the fog. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. The man who owns that house, one of the richest human beings who has ever drawn breath on this planet, does not think of it as much of anything at all. To him, it's a rounding error. A number so small next to the rest of his fortune that if you tried to put it on a chart, you'd need a microscope to find it. This is the strange, almost unbelievable story of Jensen Huang, the leather-jacketed founder of Nvidia, and the quietly staggering California empire he has assembled, while somehow convincing the world he's just a regular guy who eats lunch in the company cafeteria. And before we tour a single square foot of that empire, you should see where it began. Not a boardroom, not Wall Street, but a booth at a roadside diner where Huang and his co-founders first sketched out the company that became Nvidia.
And so we hung out at Denny's whenever they dropped by, which is, by the way, my alma mater, my first company.
Denny's, his alma mater, his first company. Hold that image, because the distance between that booth and the block we're about to walk is the whole story. Let's start with that house, because it's the crown jewel. The property is 2712 Broadway, and it sits on the most prestigious block in Pacific Heights, the kind of neighborhood where the previous residents have included Larry Ellison of Oracle and members of the Getty dynasty. This isn't a house you stumble into. It was a spec build, a mansion constructed entirely on speculation, with no particular buyer in mind, by a developer named Bill Campbell, who bought the old 19th century clapboard house that used to stand on the lot for $7.8 million back in 2009, tore it to the ground, and spent nearly 4 years raising this limestone monument in its place. And then, in June of 2017, it sold. Not just sold, it set a record as the highest home sale price in San Francisco history at the time, going into contract amid a bidding war for a jaw-dropping $38 million. The buyer wasn't listed as Jensen Huang, of course. It almost never is with people at this altitude. The purchase was made through an LLC, Riva LLC, tied to Huang and his wife Lori's finances, managed by a tax lawyer connected to their family foundation. Discreet, layered, lawyered. The way the truly wealthy buy things. So what does $38 million actually get you on Billionaires Row? Let me walk you through it, because the details are almost cartoonishly opulent. You're looking at roughly 11,400 square feet spread across multiple levels, with 7 bedrooms and around 10 bathrooms. There's a private elevator gliding between the floors, a home theater, not one but 2 separate wine rooms, and an outdoor kitchen out on the terrace. There's a gym, a spa, a 3-car garage, and those views I mentioned, they aren't an accident. The north-facing windows are made of a special non-reflective glass that reportedly costs 4 to 5 times more than ordinary glass, engineered so that nothing interrupts that panorama of the Golden Gate Bridge, day or night. The whole thing was built to a LEED Platinum environmental standard, which is the highest tier of green building certification there is. This is luxury with a conscience, or at least luxury with a very good architect. But here's where the story bends into something genuinely fascinating, because if you assume a man who buys a record-breaking mansion must be a man who collects mansions, a Bezos, a compound-hopping mogul with a dozen estates, you would be wrong. The San Francisco house is one of only 3 real properties this man owns, and the second one might surprise you even more, precisely because it's so normal, so restrained, so deliberately Long before the $38 million statement piece back in 2003, Jensen and Lori bought a 2-story estate in Los Altos Hills, California for $6.9 million. And this, not the glittering San Francisco showpiece, is the home that actually functions as their base. It sits roughly 15 miles from Nvidia's headquarters, a genuinely practical commute in the geography of Silicon Valley. The house runs somewhere around 7,000 square feet, with roughly 6 bedrooms, lush landscaping, expansive gardens, and a resort-style pool tucked into a lot of over an acre. It's elegant, it's spacious, it's exactly the kind of home a very successful engineer would buy, and that's the point. Los Altos Hills itself is a fascinating little pocket of the world. It's an affluent, low-density enclave with strict zoning that keeps the whole place feeling almost semi-rural. Minimum lot sizes often over an acre, once an agricultural community full of orchards and open space. It's where tech executives go to disappear behind hedges and trees, to have privacy without ostentation. Median home prices in the area have hovered in the $6 million range in recent years, which tells you something. Huang, a man worth well over $160 billion, chose to plant his primary family home in a neighborhood where his house price is roughly the local median. He didn't reach for the most house money could buy, he reached for the most house that made sense. And then there's the third jewel, the one where the family actually exhales. In 2004, the year after Los Altos, the Huangs bought an oceanfront compound in the Wailea resort area on the sunny southwest coast of Maui, paying somewhere around $7.5 to $7.8 million. The residence itself was completed around 2008, running roughly 8,000 square feet with 7 bedrooms. Part of a gated community with direct beach access, surrounded by tropical greenery on a property associated with around 10.5 acres on the ocean. Wailea is a master-planned 1,500-acre stretch of paradise, championship golf, pristine beaches, the kind of gated exclusivity where the Huang property is reportedly one of only about 14 homes in its specific enclave. And when the devastating 2023 wildfires tore through Maui, the Huangs, according to an Nvidia spokesperson, donated significantly to local relief efforts, a reminder that the man treats his places as part of communities, not just as trophies. 3 homes: San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Hawaii, prestige, function, and escape. It sounds like an empire, and in a sense it is, and it's one its owner insists is barely getting started.
It's taken us 31 years to be here, and we're still just beginning our journey.
31 years in and still just beginning. But hold that thought, because in part 2 I'll show you the number that turns this entire portfolio into something almost absurd. A single statistic that reveals just how small this so-called empire really is next to the ocean of wealth this man is actually sitting on. And it changes how you see everything. The 0.03% man. So we've toured the empire, the record-setting San Francisco mansion, the practical Silicon Valley estate, the oceanfront Maui retreat. Add it all up, and Jensen Huang's entire real estate portfolio comes to approximately $53 million across those 3 properties. $53 million in homes for almost any human being alive. That is a number beyond fantasy. It's generational, dynasty founding, never work again money. Now here's the statistic I promised you, the one that reframes the whole thing. That $53 million collection of luxury homes represents about 0.03% of his total net worth. Let me say that again slowly, because your brain will try to reject it. 0.03%. As of the middle of 2026, Huang's net worth is estimated in the range of $165 to over $200 billion, placing him among the 7 or 8 richest people on Earth, with the overwhelming bulk of it tied to his roughly 3.5% stake in Nvidia, the company whose market value has at times sailed past $5 trillion. Run the arithmetic, and over 99.97% of his wealth sits in assets that are not real estate at all, almost entirely Nvidia stock. Think about what that means. For the average American homeowner, home equity is often the single largest asset they own, accounting for a median of somewhere around 45% of net worth, and for middle-class families it can climb to 60, 70, even 84%. Most people in this country build their entire financial security, brick by brick, through the roof over their head. For Jensen Huang, 3 luxury homes are a lifestyle footnote, the proportional equivalent of a middle-class family spending a few $1,000s on furniture. His real home isn't a building at all. His real home is his shares. And this is where the man gets genuinely interesting, because you would expect someone with that kind of asymmetric fortune to live like a sultan. Instead, he has spent decades cultivating an image so deliberately understated it borders on the philosophical, and nothing captures that better than the jacket. If you know one thing about Jensen Huang, you know the black leather jacket. It has been his consistent public uniform for over 20 years, as instantly identifiable to him as the black turtleneck was to Steve Jobs. He wears it at every major keynote, every product launch, every meeting with world leaders. And there's a wonderful little detail about how it started. It wasn't a branding strategy at all. Huang has credited his wife Lori and his daughter for dressing him, happily admitting he lets his family pick his style. It began as comfort, as consistency, as a man who'd rather not think about clothes, and only later hardened into one of the most recognizable personal brands in all of technology. There's a moment on Joe Rogan's podcast where Rogan pulls up an old photo of Huang, and the reaction is pure, unfiltered Jensen.
Same jacket.
Look at that. I haven't aged.
It's a throwaway joke, but it tells you everything. 2 decades, one silhouette now. Is the jacket actually humble? Well, that's the delicious contradiction. The jackets are frequently high-end Tom Ford pieces, running anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 and up. This is casual luxury, not thrift store minimalism. But the effect is the same either way. It reads as a uniform, not a flex. And the culture around it has become so intense that one signed Tom Ford jacket of his was recently auctioned at Sotheby's for charity, for the price of a house down payment. Asked once, jokingly, what he'd wear if the world ran out of black leather jackets, Huang didn't miss a beat about his supply.
If there were a worldwide shortage of black leather jackets, what would we be see you wearing?
He answered exactly the way you'd expect a man who has quietly stockpiled his own signature to answer.
Oh no, I've got a large reservoir of black jackets.
A reservoir, that's the word he used, and it fits the whole pattern. Even his indulgences are systematized, practical, engineered against future shortage. What about the cars? Here, too, the picture is more restrained than you'd guess. Huang is a genuine car enthusiast rather than a hypercar collector, a longtime Mercedes-Benz fan who once bought his parents an S-Class after Nvidia's IPO, reports mention a Maybach GLS 600, an ultra-luxury SUV valued north of $300,000 as a more recent upgrade. And on Rogan chatting about horsepower, he let slip that he's owned Ferraris, comparing his own machines with the offhand fluency of a man who has actually driven them hard.
I enjoyed my 599 more than my 612.
The 599 and the 612 both Ferraris. So the taste is there, the money is obviously there, but it's not a garage of 40 exotic cars. It's a handful of beautiful machines and a genuine appreciation for the engineering. Performance as a passion, not possession as a scoreboard. Then there's the routine, and this is maybe the most revealing part of all, because how does a man worth $200 billion actually spend his days? Does he lounge on the Maui Lanai? Not even close. Huang is a self-described workaholic who works 7 days a week, including holidays, describing it as working from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed. His days can stretch to 14 hours, and even during downtime, watching a movie, work thoughts keep intruding. He rises around 5 or 6 in the morning and reads in bed for the first hour specifically so he doesn't disturb his dogs before starting the day with exercise. He plans his priorities daily, sometimes the night before, tackles the key tasks early, and has described embracing a kind of low-grade anxiety as fuel for relentless execution. There is, by design, no traditional work-life balance here at all. And the food. A man who could hire any private chef on the planet instead eats many of his meals in the Nvidia company cafeteria. Not to save money, but to stay connected to his employees. No extreme diets, no gold flake steaks, just efficient fuel for long days, and Taiwanese comfort food from his heritage when he wants it. So we have a portrait forming, a record-breaking mansion he treats as a rounding error, a jacket worth thousands that reads as humility, a handful of Ferraris, and a workaholic's cafeteria lunch. It's a study in contradictions, and to understand where it all comes from, you have to go back, way back, to a 9-year-old boy alone cleaning toilets in the mountains of Kentucky. Because that's where this man was actually forged. And that's part 3, the empire that wasn't built with money. To understand why a man worth over $160 billion eats in the cafeteria and wears the same jacket for 20 years, you have to rewind the tape almost 60 years to a middle-class family in Tainan, Taiwan. Jensen Huang was born in 1963, the younger of 2 sons. His father was a chemical engineer, his mother a school teacher who taught her boys English by picking 10 random words from the dictionary every single day, despite her own limited proficiency, simply to prepare them for a future abroad they could barely imagine. That future arrived brutally. When Jensen was around 9, his parents made an almost unthinkable sacrifice. They sent him and his older brother across the ocean to live with relatives in the United States, selling nearly all of their possessions to afford the trip and the schooling. The relatives meant to enroll the boys in a good boarding school. Instead, through a misunderstanding, they ended up at the Oneida Baptist Institute in rural Kentucky. Not an elite prep academy at all, but a religious reform school largely serving troubled and at-risk youth. Life there was harsh in ways that are hard to overstate. Huang's roommate was a 17-year-old described as the toughest kid in school, illiterate, covered in tattoos and knife scars. Jensen taught him how to read. In exchange, the older boy taught him how to bench press. And because Jensen was one of the youngest kids there, he was handed the job nobody wanted. He was assigned as a janitor, cleaning the bathrooms for around 100 teenage boys every single day. He has since turned that grim chore into one of the most famous lines in modern tech. Standing in front of a crowd at Stanford years later, explaining why he believes no task is beneath any leader, he laid it out plainly.
I used to clean toilets. I mean, I cleaned a lot of toilets. I've cleaned more toilets than all of you combined.
That's not a line he tells for sympathy. It's the whole operating philosophy. If the man who runs the most valuable company on earth has scrubbed more toilets than a room full of Stanford graduates combined, then no job, no detail, no task is beneath anyone. That mindset, forged in a Kentucky dormitory, is the real foundation of everything that came after. Eventually, his parents made it to America. The family reunited in Oregon, and Jensen turned out to be a prodigy. He excelled at Aloha High School, skipped grades, graduated at 16, became a nationally ranked table tennis player, and discovered programming on an Apple II. He went to Oregon State University for electrical engineering, and it's there that the second pillar of his life walked into the room. Her name was Lori. She was his lab partner. And Jensen, at 16, was, in his own words, the only student who looked like a child in a class of 250. He decided the only play he had was to convince this older woman he was smart, and he built one of the great pickup lines in Silicon Valley history around it.
And so I walked up to her and I said, "Do you want to see my homework?"
It sounds ridiculous, but there was a strategy underneath the charm, a promise designed to guarantee he'd see her every single week.
If you do homework with me every Sunday, I promise you will get straight A's.
And then, to seal the deal for good, this 20-year-old with nothing to his name made a wildly audacious forecast about his own future.
By the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a CEO. I have no idea what I was talking about. And then we got married.
He had no idea what he was talking about, and yet they married in 1985. And he did, in fact, co-found Nvidia at 30, right on schedule. Lori, an electrical engineer in her own right, who actually out-earned him in their early careers, a fact he mentions with pride, later stepped back to raise their two children, and now serves as president of the family foundation. That foundation is where the story of the empire loops back on itself in the most extraordinary way. Because remember, the homes are a rounding error. The real fortune is the stock, and a chunk of that stock has been quietly poured into giving. The Jensen and Lori Huang Foundation, seeded with Nvidia shares back in 2007, has ballooned along with the company into the billions, holding tens of millions of shares and rivaling major institutions like the MacArthur Foundation. The couple's personal giving is deeply tied to their own story. $50 million to Oregon State University, where they met for a collaborative innovation complex, a $22.5 million matching gift that anchored a rescue of the financially struggling California College of the Arts. And in the detail that lands hardest, a matching grant of up to $2 million to that very same Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky, funding a girls' dormitory now called Jensen. Huang Hall, the little boy who scrubbed those toilets, built a building there. His two children, Spencer and Madison, both work at Nvidia now, but not handed corner offices. Spencer ran an acclaimed craft cocktail bar in Taipei that landed on Asia's 50 best bars list, before joining Nvidia and rising to a product manager role in robotics. Madison trained at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris and worked for LVMH before starting as a marketing intern and climbing to a senior director of product marketing. Cocktails and pastry, then robotics and Omniverse, an unusual set of roads into the family company, and the empire has grown beyond real estate and stock into something harder to measure: raw influence. In March of 2026, President Trump announced Huang's appointment to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, alongside figures like Zuckerberg, Ellison, and Andreessen. His relationship with Trump reportedly began with a Mar-a-Lago dinner and has included late-night phone calls and invitations on international trips. On Rogan, Huang described that access almost with wonder, recounting a moment when the president simply decided, on a whim, to phone him.
President Trump called, and I called you.
A sitting president dialing him up out of the blue. That's a different kind of wealth entirely. The kind you can't buy on Billionaires Row. So let's step back and look at the whole man. 3 luxury homes worth $53 million. An amount so trivial to him, it barely registers as a fraction of a percent. A closet of expensive jackets he wears like a uniform. A few Ferraris and a cafeteria lunch. A workaholic who rises before dawn to avoid waking his dogs. Married for 4 decades to the lab partner he charmed with a homework pitch. Funneling billions in stock into the schools that shaped him, including the reform school where he once cleaned 100 boys' bathrooms. When people ask whether Jensen Huang really owns everything, the answer is stranger and better than the question. He owns the record-breaking house, the oceanfront compound, the stock that dwarfs it all, and yet the thing that actually defines him was never for sale. It was built, brick by brick, out of hard work, family, and a refusal to believe any task was ever beneath him. That's the empire, and it's the one part he built entirely by hand. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.